From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
At the legislature today, it was crossover day, when Senate bills must leave the Senate and House bills must leave the House. The legislature has 9 days to complete its work. And some of that work will involve the state's 55 counties. We'll talk with county officials about their legislative watch list tonight on the Legislature Today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. The state Senate passed Governor Tomlin's major drug control legislation today and made it possible for police to get drugged drivers to take a blood test. But as Bob Brunner reports, the biggest debate came over a measure to encourage natural gas-powered cars.
The substance abuse legislation is a long and complicated bill aimed at controlling the number of narcotics handed out as pain pills, controlling methadone clinics, and keeping track of methamphetamine sold as cold remedies. Boone County Senator Ron Stallings is also a doctor and says doctors must use what he calls best practices instead of more pills.
We're going to be regulating pain clinics so that if you have more than 50% of your patients receiving narcotics and other substances, then basically you're going to have to get a license to be a pain clinic, and frankly, it's a pretty high bar. The other thing is, basically, we as physicians have to do best practices for treating chronic, non-malignant pain. So it requires continuing education with that regard for best practices. And we have to use this pharmacy monitoring data bank better. We're going to try to make this as real time as possible. The docs are going to have to access it if they're treating patients with chronic pain and using opioids. Again, it's the supply end. I really think that this will go a long way as far as ratcheting down on how much, Percocet, hydrocodone, oxycodone, morphine's out there to start off with.
Another doctor who is a senator, Dan Foster of Kanawha County, says the bill is too weak on tracking methamphetamines and should provide more funds for drug treatment. Still, he says he'll support any first step.
Mr. President, the problem of meth labs is escalating in West Virginia. It's increased 50% from 2010 to 2011. It is on track again this year to increase another 50% from 2011 figures, which would bring us close to the numbers in Kentucky, which is a failed tracking state on a per capita basis.
The Senate unanimously passed legislation permitting police to get a warrant to order a blood test for anyone suspected of drugged driving. There were 26 other bills which passed 34-0. There was a minor controversy and 9 no votes on a bill allowing some cities to impose a special public safety assessment fee to support police forces. And following concern from Senator Greg Tucker, the Senate soundly defeated a bill making it easier to transfer property after death by a 7-27 vote. The biggest controversy came over a measure to permit government units to sell the tax credits when they buy alternative fuel vehicles to build such things as fueling plants for natural gas cars. First, Wayne County Senator Bob Plymel pushed through an amendment limiting the benefit to $1 million. This brought the ire of Kanawha County Senator Brooks McCabe.
That means we are capping this in a way that only allows us to convert no more than 3% of our vehicles a year. That's 30 plus years by the time we actually get it done. And yet we say energy independence is paramount. Yet we say we are an energy state. Yet we say we want to do anything we can to help our economy, particularly our natural resources, and particularly to use those natural resources in the state of West Virginia.
Bill sponsor Richard Browning says he hopes the House will now repair what he admits is a flawed bill.
So what the bill did was allow them to sell the credits to people that could use them and take that cash received and put that into infrastructure to power these vehicles, either compression stations or whatever, to help fill the vehicles up with natural gas.
And is this going to happen?
Well, it is happening, and what we did today with the amendment was put $1 million on. We limited the amount of credit collectively for a year to be $1 million. Now, the argument on the floor was, do we need to limit that? I mean, aren't we trying to incentivize people to convert to those type vehicles to get off Middle Eastern oil and our dependence on other parts of the world for our livelihood? And in my estimation, the amendment hurt the bill, and I'm hoping that when it goes to the House, it can be cleaned up and taken out.
Almost unnoticed in the rush of bills was the coal bed methane distribution fund. This allows counties that don't have certain kinds of economic development authorities to recoup money from the severance tax on coal bed methane gas. And experts say in some counties that will amount to several $1 million. The heavy load of bills the past 2 days is, starting now, no bill can be introduced and considered by both houses. It's called Crossover Day because all Senate bills must already be in the House and all House bills must be in the Senate. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
The House of Delegates had under consideration 56 bills and 1 constitutional revision today. As Adam Cavalier reports, the flurry of activity was part of Crossover Day.
The House started its session with an attempt to amend the state's constitution. Monongalia County Democrat Barbara Fleischauer says House Joint Resolution 113 would give a property tax cut to senior citizens.
Anytime there is an adjustment of property tax revenue in the Constitution, it's our responsibility to ensure that it is done carefully and that it properly balances the needs of the state and the counties. This proposed constitutional amendment was preceded by 5 years of study by the Committee on Constitutional Revision and is a product of 5 years of work, by the bipartisan committee.
The resolution passed unanimously. It marked the end of a long road for Republican delegates Tim Armstead and Patrick Lane.
In the 14 years that I've been here, we've discussed this and worked toward trying to give some tax relief to our seniors. If you think about the fact that we have not increased the homestead exemption since the 1980s, I think we all know that it has not kept up with inflation. It is not as valuable to our seniors as it was back in the 80s or in the 90s.
On behalf of not only those of us who have argued and fought for it for so long, but for those people at home, the seniors out there that depend on us to help their budgets and help them get along on their fixed incomes, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you on their behalf.
While the constitutional revision easily moves on to the Senate, House Bill 4261 saw debate before it passed 70-28. The bill makes changes to the state's rulemaking processes. Armstead tried to amend the bill, telling lawmakers he fears it may give the federal government too much power.
If the federal government issues some type of rules or regulations, then under this bill, we will then just allow that an agency in the state who would move forward with those regulations to be able to do so without coming back to the legislature and promulgating those rules. And I think that is a great concern.
Armstead's amendment failed. The bill creates 2 classes of rules. State agencies will still have to go to the legislature to get their rules approved, but rules created as a result of a federal mandate will not need approval from the legislative body. House Judiciary Chair Tim Miley says the bill has practical applications, such as implementing something by a certain date.
What this does is help streamline a bit our rulemaking process, and what it's designed to do is for any federal requirement that we have to follow, it's not optional, any requirement that we have to follow, this provision of the bill permits the agency to implement those requirements only to the extent as required by the federal government, no more, but obviously no less, because they have a legal obligation to do so. It then does come back before us as a legislature to either disapprove or amend what's now being referred to as an agency promulgated rule.
House Bill 4263 creates the West Virginia Buy American Act. Finance Chair Harry Keith White says the bill will affect state buildings.
This act requires that all iron, steel, manufactured goods, coal, timber used to or supplied as construction materials paid for by a vendor under contract in a public agency's construction, improvement, or maintenance of its public buildings must be manufactured or produced in the United States, unless certain limited circumstances exist, generally involving the unavailability of the product or an unreasonably high increase in the contract price.
While House Republicans supported the bill's concept of buying American, they didn't agree to its terms. Berkeley County Republican Eric Householder says the bill takes the state into dangerous territory.
We're giving an exemption to the public agencies. And, so the state is suggesting that a contractor must buy and install American-made products, and yet they believe it's too restrictive, so they decided that it's not in their best interest to comply. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that this bill is good enough and noble for our contractors to follow, then at the very least, you should expect our government to follow the same standards.
Boone County Democrat Larry Barker is the bill's lead sponsor. Barker says the Buy American Act can make West Virginia a front-runner.
It's past time that we set an example in this state and lead the way and encourage everyone to think about what we've been doing to ourselves. By looking outside our country for items and services we can produce for ourselves. We must reverse this trend and keep ourselves and our neighbors off the unemployment and the welfare lines.
The West Virginia Buy American Act moves on to the Senate 82-16. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Cavalier in Charleston.
A group of young people spent some time today marching quietly around the Capitol Rotunda. It was a polite demonstration on an issue some young people feel is very important. These youngsters are from 7 high schools ranging from Fairmont to Elkins to Parkersburg and Charleston. They are members of the West Virginia Association of Student Governments, and they want anyone listening to consider the issue of bullying. The group's president is Isabella Leon of Fairmont.
Our message is that nobody deserves to be bullied, that everybody should love everybody, trying to convince any passerby that it's not worth it, that everybody deserves a chance to live to the full extent. And if somebody notices, we hope somebody notices.
The demonstration continued at the Capitol through much of the morning. Coming up, county officials are seeking a pay increase from the state legislature. We'll talk about that. First, here's 8 bills that have ended their legislative journey and have been signed by the governor. Senate Bill 165, making sexual contact between inmates and corrections officers a felony regardless of consent. Strip searches, pat-downs, and other security-related tasks are not considered sexual contact. Senate Bill 209, updating terms in the Personal Income Tax Act, and Senate Bill 210, updating the terms in the Corporation Net Income Tax Act. These bills must be enacted every year. Senate Bill 343, to provide a grace period for volunteer fire departments to comply with submission of data to the State Fire Marshal in order to receive allocations from municipal funds and the Fire Protection Fund. Senate Bill 469, Governor Tomlin's bill to identify a plan to pay down the liability of other post-employment benefits. House Bill 4086, the Cracker Bill, Governor Tomlin's measure to provide tax incentives to companies that locate an ethane cracker plant in the state. House Bill 4107, to require the State Fire Commission to propose rules to establish training requirements for volunteer firefighters, including minimum levels of equipment and performance measures to improve fire prevention and control. And House Bill 4291, providing that circuit courts may no longer establish county law libraries and that the Supreme Court of Appeals alone shall determine if these libraries should remain open as an obligation of the state. How do people get the attention of the legislature? Some write or telephone, some form picket lines. And each year, people from about 20 counties come to the state capitol to make their issues known. As Bob Brunner reports, those making the effort say it's worth it.
A cold winter day at the state capitol, but under the dome at midday, the lilting rhythms of the Caribbean. These are 8th graders from Frankfort Middle School in Mineral County, more than 180 miles from Charleston. They're here as part of Mineral County Day at the legislature, joined by citizens from the area with something to say to their lawmakers. Among them, a veterinarian who's a member of the county commission. He says this effort really pays off.
I find it very advantageous to meet with the development office people and the Department of Transportation. When I was the mayor of the town originally, we had some road issues, and it made all the difference in the world to come down here with some of the citizens of the town and explain the problems we were having. And it made a real voice, and it brought attention to the issue and came and addressed it, which was great.
Lawmakers and state officials are also invited to a special luncheon prepared by the culinary students from Potomac State College. There are salads and sandwiches and even a creamy lobster bisque. Lawmakers, staffers, even Secretary of State Natalie Tennant come by after the aroma of the food wafts their way. The provost of Potomac State says this is a way to make his institution visible under the Capitol dome.
For us at Potomac State College, this is a tremendous opportunity for the college to engage with the Mineral County community. It's also an opportunity for us to showcase our academic programs, and our students, our hospitality students are here today preparing a meal for the legislators and delegates and representatives here at the Capitol. And they really shine for us, gives the folks here an opportunity to see the quality students that we have and the fine job that they do for us. It's also an opportunity for us to tell folks what the needs are in Mineral County.
These are Potomac State students. They're not only getting a good recommendation from the legislature, they're feeding them. And that's one way to the legislature's heart. More than 20 counties and a dozen associations plan days at the legislature, sometimes filling hallways with displays, sometimes organizing groups of citizens to buttonhole specific lawmakers, and every now and then to serenade them. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
The West Virginia Association of Counties represents various county officials, including clerks, assessors, sheriffs, prosecuting attorneys, and county commissioners. At the beginning of this session, the association printed an 11-page booklet of what counties support and oppose. Joining us tonight is Jeff Waybright, the clerk of Jackson County and the president-elect of the West Virginia Association of Counties, and Patty Hamilton, its executive director. Welcome. I'm giggling because you were reading right along with me on the teleprompter.
You did well.
Thank you. Welcome. Glad you're here. Mr. Waybright, you're going to get a salary increase?
Doesn't look like it this year. The bill has not made it through Finance Committee and the Senate side, and so it's dead as far as this year's concerned.
Why not? Did you ask anybody why not?
We did, and really weren't given a distinct answer. We had various answers, but that's the way it goes, and we've learned that through.
It's been 6 years since county officials got a pay raise.
That's right.
Okay, the question is, why does the state legislature set the salaries of county officials?
That is a very good question, actually, and I just posed that question to a constitutional lawyer to make sure that when we said the legislature has to do this, that we were correct. County officials are constitutional officers. It says in the Constitution that the legislature prescribes the salaries, so that's why we get to have all this fun.
So if we change this, we'd have to change the Constitution in order to change
it looks like we'd have to have a constitutional amendment to change the process.
A couple of bills, measures that were reported on today. In the Senate, this natural gas-powered vehicles has to do with government. If Jackson County wants to buy natural gas-powered vehicles, does Jackson County want to buy natural gas-powered vehicles?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't talked to the commission about that.
Does any county government want to buy natural gas-powered vehicles?
There are several interested, I think, and I think they will become more interested if this bill passes.
Okay.
And it's a little bit technical. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think there's definitely interest out there, and we like this bill.
And it has to do with the tax credit that the state grants a purchaser of an alternative fuel vehicle.
Yes.
But governments can't accept tax credits.
Right.
So you can sell the tax credits.
Yeah, exactly.
Who would want to buy tax credits? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I guess
either.
there's somebody out there who will. Because
Regarding the constitutional amendment that passed the House on the homestead exemptions, how does this affect counties?
we're watching HJR 113 closely. It's a county option homestead exemption. So the county would petition the legislature with a homestead exemption designed the way they want it.
Okay.
And there's various alternatives in the language. Then the legislature would enact that in the form that the county would receive it back and put it on the ballot for the county citizens to vote. One concern is can the legislature alter the language that the county sends in?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the county wants a constitutional or a homestead exemption amendment that does this, and the legislature gives them back that. And do they have to put that on the ballot then if it's not what they wanted?
But it would allow counties to increase or decrease a homestead exemption.
You could only increase it. A county could not decrease
it.
the one already in the Constitution.
Mr. Wainwright, what's a county's relationship with the legislature? Mineral County came down, lobbied the legislature. Does Jackson County do the same thing? And what's the county's relationship with the legislature?
Well, as far as the Jackson County Day, I haven't participated in one since I've been county clerk, and this is my fourth term, but we have a good relationship with our delegates and senators, I believe. We understand their job is a very difficult job, and we have things that we would like to see done. We're on the front lines, boots on the ground, so to speak, at county government level.
Really?
And we just try to explain to them the best way possible for us to do our jobs. And for the most part, they're very receptive to us. And I think we have a very good working relationship.
Mm-hmm, very good. You want county representation on the PEIA Finance Board. How come?
I know that doesn't sound really exciting, but it's actually very important. Most counties are in PEIA for their health care coverage, and we are in a separate pool from the state employees. And so we'd like to have representation on that PEIA Finance Board to be able to vote on the premiums and the other things. The Finance Board makes a lot of decisions.
I guess I'm surprised that county representation isn't on the Finance Board now.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
It should.
Is city municipal?
It would include all non-states, so it would be a representative for all our little non-state pool, which is about 10% of the PEI customers.
Mr. Wainwright, we know that county clerks are seeing a lot of activity right now because of Marcellus Shale activity. What kind of activity are you seeing or your colleagues seeing in regards to this?
It's more my colleagues than it is myself.
In
If you
Jackson
drive
County,
80 to 100 miles north of Jackson County, if you go to Wetzel County, you go to Marshall County, Harrison County, those counties up in the northern part of the state, they are seeing all kinds of activity as far as individuals coming into lease. And when they do that, they come to our county record rooms, and that's where we keep the records as far as deeds of trust, oil and gas leases, a multitude of things, marriage license, births, deaths. And we have to keep those in a condition that the public can utilize those to their best advantage.
This isn't online. This is a room with big books.
It's a room. It is a room with many books, with many pages in those books that are easily destroyed or taken out because many come in and want to make copies of those so they can go to the individual who owns the oil and gas interest to lease the property for drilling. So.
And you don't think of this being an issue because you just don't know about it. Can the legislature give you any kind of remedy here?
Well, I'm sure they can. Now we have a remedy as far as replacing a lot of that because of the copy costs that we receive, which goes into general county funds and then is dispersed back to us at budget time to help us maintain those books. So yes, there's an avenue there.
Good to know.
Yes.
All right, Jeff Wainwright, the clerk of Jackson County, and Patty Hamilton with the West Virginia Association of Counties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth.
And here's a look at some of the bills that have completed legislative action and are awaiting the signature of the governor. Senate Bill 30 to provide for an alternative means for the initial purchaser of junked vehicles to notify the Division of Motor Vehicles in compliance with the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System. The bill also broadens the authority of the DMV to alert consumers, motor vehicle dealers, and the insurance industry of a vehicle's history. Senate Bill 379, authorizing the State Nursing Board to designate programs in which nurses may be monitored while pursuing treatment and recovery for alcohol abuse, chemical dependency, or major mental illness, and in which these nurses may voluntarily enroll without being subject to disciplinary action if the nurse is complying with the program's requirements. House Bill 4087, Governor Tomlin's bill to extend the moratorium on the regular severance tax on timber until such time as the additional workers' compensation debt reduction tax on severing timber expires. House Bill 4415, establishing a 9-member authority to oversee renovations at the railroad station in Prince, West Virginia, which is expected to be used by passengers attending events at the Bechtel Family Summit Scout Reserve in Fayette County. And House Bill 4493, to make March 30th a special Memorial Day to be known as Vietnam Veteran Recognition Day, to make August 7th a special Memorial Day to be known as Purple Heart Recognition Day, and declaring July 27th as a special Memorial Day to be known as Korean War Veteran Recognition Day by a proclamation from the governor, and to encourage counties and municipalities to do the same. And this has been the Legislature Today. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.